Hey everyone. Oh, I should have moved that bong out of the background. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna talk about smoking weed anyway in this video. Anyway, I got a request to do a video about eating disorders. Um, this was from a person who I don't know how we got talking about this or how she knew that I had an eating disorder before, or maybe I mentioned it before. I don't know. But I just kind of wanted to tell the whole story of that because I think like even though there's like probably a fair bit of like talk and information and stuff about eating disorders on YouTube, I feel like so much of the discussion around eating disorders is focused on anorexia and not around bulimia. I feel like there's a lot less discussion of bulimia. I feel like there's more stigma attached to it. I feel like there's more shame attached to it. Um, because the thing about being bulimic is it is so 100% self-defeating, you know? Like your weight, it's always like plus minus zero. Like it actually never changes because well, you're never able to purge as much as you eat. And the problem is with bulimia that it gets to a point where well, your stomach is really stretched out, so the amounts you eat get bigger and bigger because you also need to eat like huge amounts to be able to make yourself throw up. Where was I going with this? Yeah, it's always plus minus zero. There's no effects on your weight, and I mean, yeah, it's just really dangerous, really unhealthy, but there's just nothing glamorous about it. With something like anorexia, like I'm not saying that there's anything glamorous about that, but um there's kind of more of a it's more socially acceptable to be controlling your diet than it is socially acceptable to say that you binge eat and you make yourself throw up. So yeah, so I wanted to talk about it openly and just tell you the story of how all of it happened. Okay, so this started when I was 16. And I was going through a lot of stuff at the time. So I never had body image issues actually. I mean, same as like every teenage girl, you know, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm so fat," you know, or I had the same issues with my body that any teenage girl would have or has. Um, but you know, up until the point where I was about 16, I'd eat whatever I wanted, and I was actually pretty happy with my body. Actually when I was 16, there was a time, and this was when it started, when I was overweight, and I was actually so cool with like my body though that I just thought like, well, I'm sexy, and I'd wear these tiny little things. One time I remember I went out wearing just like a button-down shirt, like a white button-down shirt and nothing else. Like I'm pretty short and have pretty short legs. So, you know, it kind of covered my butt, only just, but I thought I was so hot. Anyway, but then the summer of 2006, when I was 16, everything sort of changed. And I think in retrospect, well, something happened that summer that kind of changed my life in lots of ways. From that point onwards, basically, when I was 16, I was raped. Um, and after that, everything, because it was like pretty traumatic and like brutal and stuff. So after that, like everything changed. And I think, and this is something I only came to realize much, much, much later. I think on some level, after that, I really hated myself. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So, so that summer was a really, really dark time for me. And my best friend at the time, she was a lot older than me, like, I don't know, like maybe 3, 4 years or something, which kind of was a lot at the time. And she was doing Weight Watchers because she wanted to lose weight. I mean, I'm sure like she had like other issues with her like self-esteem and stuff too. But anyway, she was doing Weight Watchers, and so because she was my best friend, we hung out like every day. She'd tell me loads about it, and I just basically, it was information that I couldn't get around hearing, So eventually, like, or pretty soon, I knew exactly how much points everything was and how many, and then she, calculated like how many points I was supposed to be having in a day, and it was 18. And well, okay, so for me at that point, it was like, now that I know this information, there's no unknowing it. Like, now that I know that if I eat like two croissants in a day, that will be, that's basically all the calories that I'm allowed to consume. And so that instilled like this. Before, I used to just be like, if I'd eat like potato chips or something, like I'd eat a bunch and I'd be like, well, it's just potatoes. Like it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad for me. It can't be that like fattening or whatever. So I just kind of like, my ignorance was bliss up to that point. But then when I found out like all the, through my friend doing Weight Watchers, through that, when I found out like the calorie content and stuff of everything, like that gave me this level of awareness then. Okay, so then it kind of, and then there was another friend at school actually who was also instrumental in this, who, I mean, for some reason, I don't know if it was because it was like the mid early 2000s, everybody was obsessed with like, I don't know, Kate Moss and stuff, and everybody, there was the beauty ideal was a bit different than it is now. It was really like this waif, like super thin whatever, which I never was, and I doubt I'm ever gonna be. That's just not how I'm built. That's just something, And yeah, so a lot of my friends were like getting really into like dieting and stuff. So then I started like to kind of do Weight Watchers a little bit myself. I don't know like what even got me into it, but suddenly I got the idea in my head that, I had to lose weight too. I think because this girl, this best friend of mine back then, she one time we went swimming together when she was on her weight loss hype, and that was the first time like I saw her like in a bikini. And I was like outraged. I was like, "You're so beautiful. How can there be anything wrong with you?" And then I thought, "Whoa, if she thinks she needs to lose weight, like I really need to lose weight." Like it just, and anyway, so I kind of started doing it too, and I did it in such an unhealthy way. Like I would eat like two bowls of popcorn in a day or something, and that would be my points for the day. And I mean, it's so unhealthy, so freaking unhealthy. But yeah, so, and it was weird because then like I only did it for a couple of weeks, but over that time, that gave me like the control aspect of an eating disorder, like always having to, know exactly like what I'm consuming, what, and being in control of that, okay? But I think the sort of psychological underpinnings of why I then became bulimic, that was kind of different. So then one day I got really drunk, I remember, because I was at a party or something, and then, I'd been dieting like diligently for weeks at that point, and when I got really drunk, I just ate like a whole pizza and just devoured that. And afterwards, I felt so guilty. I couldn't like deal with my guilt at all. And then now this other friend of mine from school comes into play. Um, she had always talked about making herself throw up and always said she couldn't do it, and always asked me like, "Can you do it? Have you ever done it?" Well, I couldn't at that point. But then for some reason that kind of came into my head again, and I decided to see like, can I? Can I? And that was kind of the deciding night. So after I ate that pizza, I was so full. I felt so guilty. It was awful. I felt like I was full to about here because, my stomach had shrunken from dieting and stuff. So then I tried and I succeeded. And that started a whole bad cycle, because so this is what I think is at the very root of bulimia. It's I sort of thought that, oh, if I just make myself throw up, that's like time traveling. It's like traveling back in time to the point before I ate all that food. So that's okay. So that's just a thing that I can just do. and it'll just reverse all this stuff that I feel guilty about. Well, um, so that went on like for, I mean, I was bulimic in total for 3 years, and it got more and more out of control. Like, and this is the thing about bulimia as well. It's not like you can't eat normally anymore. You know, it's not like you can just have a meal and then make yourself throw up. It's not like that because it's such an awful, horrible process, the making yourself throw up part. Um, it tends to become a situation for everyone. I was in like these bulimia forums and stuff like that where you binge eat like a huge, huge amount, with already you already have in mind that you're gonna make yourself throw up afterwards, and it needs to be, you want to make it easier for yourself, so you binge on things like ice cream. Ice cream is a big favorite among bulimics because that's a really easy thing to throw up. um right, so yeah, then with every day I would like binge for, and I was spending a lot of time alone at home. I was living with my mother in those days, but she would like always be at work or out or whatever. And so I spent a lot of time alone. I had a lot of time to myself to be able to do this kind of stuff. Like, and it was like, I would never make myself throw up after like I had like a meal with friends or a meal that somebody else cooked for me. No, it became this thing, and this is what I think that bulimia is. I think much more than it has anything to do with your body image, because it's not a way to lose weight. It has so much more to do with how you feel about yourself, and it's kind of like self-harming because, even while I was binge eating, like it wasn't fun. Like it was like this, I just went into this dissociative state when I was doing it. I was just on autopilot for all of that. And, this is a discussion often among bulimics, like, what is it that makes this a habit? Is it the habit of binge eating, or is it the habit of throwing up? And, for me, it was like such a stress release, the part where I was binge eating, that's actually the part where I was basically punishing myself. And, I became more and more aware of this voice that I had in my head when I was doing that, just being like, yeah, I would never eat good food. I'd only eat like awful, disgusting food, and just be like, yeah, this is all trash. Like, this is trash because I'm trash. So I need to put all this trash in myself, because that's, what I deserve. And then, this voice in my head just telling me, yeah, you fat pig, like, keep like, keep stuffing yourself full of trash. Becoming aware though of mm, this voice was actually what kind of started when I started finding my way out of being bulimic. Because what I always want to stress is how little it has to do with body image. I don't know if this also counts for anorexia, but it has really nothing to do with body image at all. Because no matter what changes you could be seeing in yourself, you would still hate yourself. And I got to a point where, I also started doing speed in those days, started doing drugs. And doing the speed actually, I took some diet pills that I like found at some like friend's house or something and stole. And they'd been banned at that point. They were, just basically straight up amphetamines. That's what got me into speed. And then eventually I lost the weight and I was skinnier than ever. I'd reached my goal weight, and I looked in the mirror and I thought, well, you're ugly and I hate you, And that's when I became aware of this voice in my head, which I called bulimia. Because it was this bully in my head always telling me that I was ugly and I was worthless, and just all of the most awful things you could ever think about yourself. This voice would always tell me in my head. I took like a series of photographs, which also kind of helped me get over stuff or differentiate this voice in my head from my true self. I've come to believe that this voice is the ego, the toxic ego or something. And I took this series of photos representing, what bulimia looks like and feels like to me. And it was like, I put on all this makeup and I put this measuring tape, tied it in a bow around my head, and made all these horrible, horrible faces, just these grimaces, because that's how I felt. I felt that bulimia was this evil bully just like grimacing at me, and this basically this monster inside my head. And yeah, so what really made the change, even though I started realizing, how bad it was, and how, I was really just self-harming and hurting myself, um, then it was like, well, how do I change it now? How do I break the habit? And it's like that with any habit or with any addiction, that there comes a point where you're like, actually, I don't think I should be doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. My illusions about like, oh, I'm just turning back time, and all of that sort of faded, or more, rather than my illusion fading, let's put it more this way. I used to dissociate really heavily while I was doing it. I was just on autopilot. I just wouldn't think until I throw up, and then I'd have this amazing relief from the awful feeling I was giving myself eating like shitty junk food. So then it was like, well, how do I break the habit now? And for a long time I thought that this is such an important thing here. For a long time I thought to end my bulimia, I had to stop binge eating. I had to control my diet and whatever. But that's not what it's about, because by controlling, yeah, sure, that would be a wonderful solution. Okay, what if I only ate healthy from now on? What if I only ate things that I don't feel guilty about? Yeah, great solution. How about I just never feel guilty and hate myself again? That'll work. Yeah, but that's so exactly not the point, because, you know, you're always going to have these moments of guilt after overeating. And I still do until today. Anyway, and my ideal at that point was getting back to how I was when I was like 14, where I would just eat whatever I wanted without a thought, without any guilt, without anything. And I have gone back to that point, by the way, more or less, like now and then I do think, like now and then if I overeat and I feel like sick because of how much I've eaten, I feel like super, super full. That's kind of when the thoughts come back creeping in of just like, well, you could make yourself throw up. But here's the key. Here's the key. The habit that you need to break to stop being bulimic is not overeating. The habit you need to break is purging afterwards, or feeling so bad about your overeating that you do things like, there's different forms of bulimia. There's one, for example, if you're diabetic, where you skip your insulin shots, so that none of that sugar that you ate gets metabolized, or I'm not sure how it works. But anyway, that's one form of bulimia. Another form is to take like lots of what do you call it? Laxatives. Another form is to like do like lots of crazy exercise like afterwards. I mean, that's probably the healthiest form. But anyway, the habit I had to break was the habit of making myself throw up when I felt super full and super guilty after overeating. And that was a hard habit to break because I was over binge eating every single day. That was the only way I knew to eat at this point. But this is what helps. Eating with other people in groups. And I think that, I mean, as far as I know, that's also helps with any eating disorder. Preparing food together in a group, eating with people, having regular meals with people, because there's a certain sense, because it comes from a place of self-hate and self-loathing. If somebody else prepares food for you, you do not throw it up afterwards, because there's this overwhelming sense of like gratefulness, because you hate yourself basically. And so you're like, wow, somebody else has made food for me. Like, I'm so grateful. Uh, I mean, now the next kind of step for me is like trying to give myself that appreciation, like making food for myself that is good and healthy and stuff, and then saying like, no, like you prepare that with love for you, out of love for you. So, why would you disrespect yourself by throwing that up? I mean, you wouldn't disrespect other people by throwing up food that they made for you. So that kind of work. Another thing that helped, and I mean, I wouldn't recommend this to everyone, because not everyone obviously can smoke weed and have no bad side effects. Some people have bad side effects, and if you do, then don't smoke it. Um, but another thing that did help was smoking weed, because, I would still obviously binge eat, but then it was like, it's fine, it's munchies, and I'm too stoned right now to it really, I mean, I have to say, I wish I had like a more like deep, amazing, wholesome solution or something. But really, what was really important in my recovery was just being in a situation where I was like, no, I can't be bothered to make myself throw up now. I really can't be bothered, because it kind of got like more and more, as I got further into the disorder, it got more and more like that I would stall for hours and hours before throwing up to the point where it basically made no sense anymore. But that was kind of what saved me in the end, because I would just purposely, I would, just my nature, which is always to procrastinate on everything. So every time I'd be like, well, how long can, if I just overeat and I want to make myself throw up, I'd be like, well, how long can I draw this out? And then, once like 3 hours have passed, you're like, well, I've probably digested this now. There's no point in it. So that's what helped me, like, to break that habit. And then, your stomach readjusts, because if you're not making yourself throw up every day once or twice after binge eating a huge amount, and then your stomach can only fit so much, and you start to learn like, well, I'm going to feel sick, and I can't do my little time travel, time reversal trick and make myself throw up after that, because I've clocked now that it's futile. So yeah, that's what basically got me out of it. And then it kind of, I mean, it's still not easy. Like, for a long time, like, I had really gotten myself back to the point where I ate whatever I wanted, and I was happy with that. And I do credit weed for helping me with that, because the same way that weed can have if you smoke a lot of weed every day, it can have this effect where you kind of sleep on life and you're not motivated to do anything. It also kind of works, though, for you're not motivated to beat yourself up. You're not, you're just like, whatever, like, I'm just thinking about I'm just giggling around and having all these creative thoughts and stuff, and it kind of distracts you. It's the hugest distraction ever. So I do have to credit weed in that, like, but then that said, like, nowadays, even if I don't smoke weed, like I haven't made myself throw up, except for when I, like, being like way too drunk and feeling sick. I haven't made myself throw up in like, since, I don't know, like, probably like 8 years or something now, which is amazing, which is really amazing for me. So, okay, I'm gonna probably wrap this up here because it's been going on for a while, but that was the story. And I really want you to comment or message me or anything if you want to talk about this kind of stuff and your thoughts on it and your experience with it. And yeah, please reach out to me, because it's not going to be the last video that I make on this. I'm going to go into it more. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it, because also a lot of my early videos on YouTube, that was in the time when I was bulimic, and you can see from like my whole demeanor and stuff, like how, well, I just hated myself. I've said this before. I really just hated myself. So yeah, I mean, and it might be interesting to know that in those days, the early Lush holidays, those were the days I was binging every day and making myself throw up every day. It's a pretty troubled kid. But yeah, so that's all on that, but there'll be more soon. I'll see you soon. Love you guys lots.